And come on now, we are the African American Museum and Library at Oakland, working in partnership with the Oakland Museum, and one of the things we do is to try to interpret African American culture and history. So when we give you a greeting, our expectation, we come out of a call and response tradition. So I'm gonna say it one more time. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Oh, that sounds good. Let's clap. Let's give yourselves a hand. That sounds good. And we're gonna start in a few moments. Thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate it, and so do our colleagues here at the museum and everybody who's a part of this event today. And we've got one more panelist who's coming over, Jahi, who's going to join our panel. And so he's doing an interview right now. Is there anybody here who was involved in the drumming circle and the drumming workshop earlier? But you got a chance to see it, right? So we're gonna, pardon? And hear it, exactly. Well, that's the theme of our program today, is making a joyful noise. And the title of what we're doing is Making a Joyful Noise, Community and Belonging in Lake Merritt. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna go up the stairs, and I expect Jahi to kind of ramble over in a few moments, okay? Here he is. To do anything technically, Marshall? Okay, and all these mics are on, huh? All right, thank you. So my name is Susan Anderson. I'm the interim chief curator at the African American Museum and Library. And in a moment, I'm gonna have our guests, our panelists, introduce themselves. But if you don't mind, I just want to talk a little bit about, as we were saying, some of the themes today. We were so pleased to be invited to be a part of this day. And looking at Lake Merritt, looking at the neighborhood, looking at the community. And partly what we decided to do was to take the issues that all of us have been aware of, the kind of conflicts that have been occurring over you know, what's new and what's developing in this area, in Oakland, but in a lot of other places. And for us, it was really important to give it a historical context. That's partly what the mission of our museum and library is, to document that African American history in California, to preserve it and to make it accessible. And we realized, looking at all the news, looking at all the things that were coming out of the news, that there were stories that had not been told that could put a lot of this into context. If you have a chance to look at our exhibit today, which is going to be up at AAMLO for some time, you can come see it there too. You'll see that what we do is extend the history, the Black presence at Lake Merritt, African American experiences in this area, all the way back until the 19th century. We start with the colored school that in 1870 that was in Brooklyn Township. And then we bring the story through the Stevens family in the 1920s, through the early 60s and some of the sites of protest leading up to the Black Panther Party, and beyond that to the Lake Festival and kind of the baby boomer generation experience of Lake Merritt. So that was a lot of our thinking, and that's a context, and we want to pay attention to that. Let's move on. What I'd like to do is to have each person introduce themselves. Jahi is sitting next to me. He ran the drumming workshop in Circle this morning. There's going to be another one this afternoon, right after we're done. And I really want Jahi to do a couple of things to talk about the drumming and the joyful noise of drumming and how that relates to our theme, and also tell some stories about his experiences in relationship to Lake Merritt. So let's welcome Jahi.
Normally after I make drums, I want to take about 15 minutes to just calm down, but it's all good. I'm glad I'm here. Today, as I said to Oakland North, was a labor of love. I like the idea of creating drums and giving them free to the community. I love the idea of working with institutions like the Oakland Museum of California to be able to get the funding, to be able to get the supplies and the materials. If you know anything about drums, you know outside of the human body and the human voice, the first instrument on the planet Earth was a drum from the African continent, used to communicate a variety of different messages and energies throughout the world. Today, specifically, the table drum is a creation I came up with in 1989 after working with a master drummer who gave me an assignment of using simple materials to put together an instrument. I had no idea what I was doing. He had some wood in the backyard, some tape, a hammer and some nails, and I just tried to put something together. It actually was 3 pieces of wood. And then out of that, he showed me if I could make it into a square, talked to me about the idea of a skin, like the skin of a djembe drum. How many of you know what a djembe drum is? Djembe drum has a round head, normally goat skin that's on it, so that's what the tape is. So today was 4 simple materials: wood, tape, nails, and markers. On the drums, you had to put 4 words that represent who you are, not just today, but for the rest of your life. So if you put peace, then when you tape the drum, you're bonded to peace, to be peaceful, to bring that into your life and share that. You know, I'm not originally from Oakland, but I've been living here for 20 years. And yeah, I have a goal of 10,000 drums. As of today, I'm at 8,500. Once those frames are gone, it'll be 8,500. I appreciate this collaboration because it gives the historical context. And then also, I think today I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So just seeing the intergenerational connectivity that we can do here in a community space is really a joy. So, is that good? Okay, all right.
It's a good start, right?
Yeah, I'm just glad we're here. I'm glad we're here at the Oakland Museum of California. I think the idea of building, turning these spaces into community spaces is something I'm glad to be a part of. So,
thank you so much. And we're gonna continue the discussion. Also, I want you to know that we're very interested in your thoughts and your questions, and we'll be having an exchange. What we're gonna do is go next to Gayle Dickson, who's the artist on the exhibit. We were really pleased to be able to work with these 2 gifted artists. And then we're going to have Ellen Butler, who's at the end, and we're going to wrap up the introductions with Mrs. Electra Price, who's next to the end. So, Gayle?
Like she said, my name is Gayle Dickson. However, I've had several names in the course of my length on this earth. And I'm also a Sally. When I was in the Black Panther Party in the early 70s, I did a lot of drawings for the back pages of the Black Panther Party newspaper. My name was Asali then. And I have since reclaimed my original name. So I have started, I've been drawing since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, and now I've gotten back into drawing again because this young lady that's sitting back there saw me at the conference and said, let's go do some drawing together. And so I'm back on track. And I've been in the Bay Area. I came here when I was 2 years old. A lot of information is on my artist statement, but I was born in Berkeley, and we moved to Oakland when I was about 2 years old. And I grew up here in the lake, Fairyland. You want me to go on? Okay. Fairyland. I went to Fairyland, and that was just like, for a child, that was just fantastic. So much so that when I got older, I wanted to make sure that I took my children to Fearing Land. And then when I had grandchildren, I took my grandchildren to Fearing Land. You know, we jogged around the lake as a young adult. I remember jogging around the lake, and actually in 1980 when Ronald Reagan was president, that was the first time I was called a black bitch around the lake. Excuse me for my language, but that's what I was called. However, after that, the jogging and just the festival at the lake, and I think what else did we have here at the lake? Yeah, and the necklace of lights, so that I could bring the children down to the lake and have them see the lights. It was during the 4th of July. So I belong at the Lake Merritt because it's part of my life, it's part of my history.
Mary Ellen.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Ellen Butler. I grew up in Oakland as Mary Ellen Rose. My parents were activists in the community. One became the first African American member of the Oakland City Council. That was my father, Josh Rose. My mother, Virginia Rose, was a pioneer in early childhood education. And many children went through her child care centers who are now elders and remember Mrs. Rose from the days of the child care centers. I attended Hoover Junior High School, Oakland Tech High School, class of '57, went on to UC Berkeley, graduated class of 1961, and since that time have pursued a career in journalism, and now am retired and have written a couple of books, both with a theme of Oakland. So I'm here to talk about some of my stories that happened when I was growing up in Oakland.
You can hear me? No. My name is Electra, and it's been fun. I was from the Kimball family. My father came to Oakland, California in 1924. He came because he was urged to leave the South. That's another story. I was born in 26 at 2510 Linden Street in Oakland. I went to Clawson Elementary, Hoover Junior High, Tech High, UC Berkeley, and Holy Names College. I am just struck on what I see in Oakland today in comparison to what it was as a child for me growing up here. And you'll hear more about that.
Well, I'd like to begin. Let's use you exactly as Jahi said. You set it up. We're ready to go.
Oh, you're ready to go.
You brought a wonderful photograph of yourself sitting on the grass by Lake Merritt when you were 6 years old?
About 6 years old.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Lake Merritt was our family's vacation spot. Mainly because not only its beauty, but my dad felt it was safe. And we would come out here on the weekend to bring our lunch and sit out on the grass, and I would run around and play, and my dad was there, my mother was there, so it became a part of our life. Then pretty soon, I was old enough to get on the boats, and they had, which looked like a ferry, and you'd climb on it, and they'd take you all around the lake. And then pretty soon you'd see people with their individual boats, and then there was some conflict about safety. I've also remember the women's rowing group that was there, and that was quite something to see. Also, the fireworks. You look forward to the 4th of July to go down to the lake and see the fireworks. As I grew up in Oakland, I would always come back to Lake Merritt because that was, again, as I said before, part of my home. I lived on, let's see, I left you off at Jahi. I lived on Lake Shore as an adult, had 2 daughters, and we would walk the lake. And I was feeling pretty good. I could get around it in about 55 minutes. I wouldn't dare try it now. But again, they were a part of life, of our life on the lake. And as I drive by it, or ride by it today and look at it, I kind of miss the family part of it that I saw there. And I'm just hoping that with all of our efforts, we can get that back there again, because it was a wonderful time of life, yeah. And I'll stop here, my voice is going out.
Well, in thinking how to organize my thoughts for today, I decided I would go by decades. So from 1940 to 1950, I was born in 1940. What I remember about Lake Merritt are the fireworks on July 4th, the powerboat races. Talk about joyful noise. The powerboat races took place once a year, and they were very loud, but it was fun to hear them as they raced up and down the lake. And also one memory I haven't been able to corroborate with anybody else. I remember a carnival, and I called a couple of friends of mine who date back that far, and I said, do you remember a carnival? We kids were allowed to walk from St. Augustine's Episcopal Church at 27th and West Streets over to Lake Merritt for this carnival. And there would be game booths and Ferris wheel. All of this is quite vivid, thank you, in my memory. But the 2 friends that I did call had no memory of it. So if there's anyone here today who goes back that far and can remember a carnival at Lake Merritt, that would be wonderful to hear. Then in the 1950s to 1960s, I was a recreation director for the Department of Recreation in Oakland. And one of the places I worked in the summertime was Allendale Elementary School in East Oakland. And I brought a group of teenagers down to Lake Merritt for whaleboat racing lessons. And in fact, as Electra and I were coming out today, I saw a whaleboat on Lake Merritt. So apparently they still have them. So what we were to do was to learn how to row these whaleboats, me and the kids. And I was the coxswain, the person who sits at the end of the whaleboat and directs the crew, turn left, turn right. So we came several times to Lake Merritt and practiced rowing the whaleboat. Then there was to be a race. So we were all set. We came down on the bus from Allendale, and we participated in this whaleboat race. And I swear, we were ahead. And I was the coxswain directing the crew. And for some ungodly reason, I said to them, turn left, instead of having them go straight, which would have got us over the finish line first. So we lost, we did not win the race. We were like second or third because I directed the crew the wrong way. So we got back to the dock, and the tradition was for the coxswain to be thrown in the water by his crew, his or her crew. So even though we had not won the race, my boys looked over at me like this. And they came over and they tossed me into the lake by the edge of the pier. Well, of course, I didn't swim very well. So I made my way back up to the surface and asked for some help to get out of the water. So I was soaking wet, and I couldn't go back on the bus and take the boys back to Allendale. So they had to go on their own, which broke the rules. And somebody else had to give me a ride home, and I was soaking wet. And I was the coxswain who did not know how to swim or show them the right way to go. So I've never forgotten that. So I was a recreation director in part of the 1950s to 1960s. Then from about 1960 to 1990, I did not live in Oakland. I lived in Berkeley, in Washington, D.C., and in Concord. So, and yet, paying attention to Lake Merritt continued for me because I worked part of that time at the Oakland Tribune. So any events or any controversies that took place around Lake Merritt, I was aware of and participating in talking about them and writing about them. So that included in the Festival of the Lake. Then after that was resolved, a few years later, there was a problem with double parking. People were coming to the lake and they were so happy to be there that they double parked their automobiles and went over to do their whatever activities they were doing at the lake. So that created a traffic problem, and that had to be worked out by the city, just as the Festival of the Lake had to be worked out. So from time to time, there are issues involving Lake Merritt. And that's why it's so good to have this event today, because you've brought these issues to the fore. We're not pretending that they're not existing. And it takes everybody's efforts to resolve some of these issues that are now taking place. So that was what I participated in and was a part of the decades up until about 1990. Then I had a period of time where I attended the Lake Merritt United Methodist Church, which is just around the corner from here. And that was another way of staying in touch with Lake Merritt, because in that church you can look out the window and you see Lake Merritt. And of course the name of the church also involves Lake Merritt. Then since that time, I've been aware of Lake Merritt, but not necessarily participating in activities at Lake Merritt until this year, when just a few months ago, my daughter and granddaughter and I participated in a rally at Lake Merritt in help me out. And thank you. In response to the separation of families by the Trump administration. And the natural place for people to gather to protest that was Lake Merritt. So that's where we went. And since that time, I've realized that Lake Merritt has been part of my life, and now a part of my daughter's and grandchildren's lives, and will continue to be so. And I'd like just to ask my 2 daughters and 1 granddaughter to stand up, please. So that gives us 3 generations of people who have been active at Lake Merritt, and I believe it just means that Lake Merritt is loved and it is treasured. Thank you.
I wanted to mention a couple of things at the African American Museum and Library. We have a very significant archival collection, which is one of the primary ways that we preserve this history and make it accessible to researchers. And we're very fortunate that Mrs. Butler, some time back, we have the papers of her father, Joshua Rose, there if you're ever interested in pursuing research. And also we're very fortunate to have Mrs. Price's, Electra Price's papers there. Lake Merritt as a site of protest is part of the history, absolutely. What I'd like to do is move to Gayle and then to Jahi.
I kind of did this, put the cart before the horse, but I was born in Berkeley, like I said, and raised in Oakland, and I've lived on 54th Street in Oakland and Martin Luther King now. It used to be Grove Street, and then 40th Street in Oakland. And finally, as a teenager, we moved to East Oakland. And I went to all the schools in Oakland, I think. I went to Santa Fe and Longfellow. And it's no longer Longfellow anymore. I don't know what it is. I think it's a charter school now. So I went to Santa Fe and Longfellow. I went to Woodrow Wilson, and then we moved out to East Oakland, and I went to Frick Junior High. And then I went to Castlemont High School, and then had a falling out with my French teacher, and wound up going to, that's a separate story, going to Fremont High School. And then I went to Laney, and then I went to Merritt. Do you see a pattern? I went to Laney, and then I transferred over to Merritt because that's where all the action was. And then I went to, I took classes at UC Berkeley, and in 1983, when I had already returned to Oakland in '72, but when I returned back to school, I went to Holy Names University now, but it was Holy Names College, and got my degree in art from Holy Names College. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And like I said, the lake, that was, I now live in Richmond, so that's kind of removed from me now. And but I was looking at it the other day, and they reconfigured a certain part of it over here. They reconfigured a certain part, so it's like a little Indian alcove part. And I was just looking at it, and I was like, oh, I gotta get me a bike and start biking. Because I can no longer jog. I get too tired to walk. And see, I was born in 1948, so I'm too tired to walk around the whole thing. My feet start burning up about halfway. And I said, well, a bike. I'm gonna start. And so the lake is a central place. You know, you get exercise, you have activities, you meet friends, and it was a good exercise to get back into my art and participate in this exhibit that the African American Museum and Library was able to participate in. So this is good. And no, I wasn't at the Free Huey rallies, but I knew about them. But for some reason, I was, you know, I'm gonna tell you, I am an artist and have been an artist all my life. And so therefore, I was in every group. I knew the gangsters, I knew the scholar people, I knew everybody in every group because I was the artist that went around the fringe. And all the groups, you know. So I knew of things without being a part of it, you know. And that was why I transferred over to Merritt College, because I wanted to be part of all the activity. But I didn't want to be in it, I just wanted to be part of it, you know. So yeah.
I'm definitely the baby at this panel, and I give thanks because I actually didn't move to the Bay Area until the first time I came to California was in 2000. At that time, Van Jones was the executive director of Ella Baker Center. The Mind's Eye Collective was working against trying to close youth prisons, and a DJ who had left left KMEL and was on KPFA, who's still there, DJ Davey D, played a song on my first album called Power Moves 2000. And when they were selecting artists to come out to the Bay, I was selected to come out to Oakland for the first time. I'm originally from Cleveland, and when I landed in Oakland, they took me from the airport directly to KPFA. And then after KPFA, they said, we got to go to San Francisco, but we need to take you by the lake first before we go. And it was at that point where I felt like, what's happening in the West Coast? What's happening? What is this lake? Because I felt like if California's 31 flavors, I saw all 31 flavors walking around that lake at that time. fast forward a year later, I moved here. I lived on Staten, which is right by the lake. My first album that I released in California, Songs from the Next Level, I actually wrote 90% of that at Lake Merritt. And the lake was always, and always has been and will be, the place that I feel like you can find community there. I would say the ignorance of Barbecue Becky has brought out some new love in the community, and I think that's actually great. The idea that, I know you were saying you hope that the families get back, but I think since the craziness of Barbecue Becky, we have been barbecuing every Sunday on the back end of Lake Merritt ever since. So sometimes craziness can bring out joy. You know, I manage 16 different school sites in Oakland, and one of the ways that we can get young people together, I remember at Edna Brewer Middle School, for Dr. King's holiday, our kings in class wanted to do something, and we talked about the idea of a silent protest. And they created signs and posters that were talking about peace and community and things like that, and we thought about where could we do it where we could get, all they wanted to get was cars to drive past a hump in agreement. And we decided it would be Lake Merritt. So we actually walked from Edna Brewer down through Trestle Glen, through Lake Shore, and ended up right on there in the corner where well, today's Saturday, the farmers market takes place. And we had about 1,000 cars honking their horns for these youth, which was really powerful. That's a Lake Merritt story that I remember. So yeah, you know, some people call it the jewel of the Bay, and I look at it as that as well.
You know, I'd like to bring, we have a tradition at AAMLO where we recognize that the people in the so-called audience often could themselves be on the panel, and that the people in the audience bring so much value. And so I might need some help from you, Marshall, because I definitely want to bring people that are sitting in the audience into the discussion. And so maybe I need one of these. And is there anybody I'd love for people to think about sharing your stories? I'm going to pick on my Aunt Joan Wilcox to start us off, because I know that you have Lake Merritt stories. And thank you. We'll share up here. Okay. I know you didn't break them all. My grandparents came to Oakland shortly after the turn of the last century, just after they had gotten married, so that all of their children were born here. Both my mother and father were born in Oakland, and in 1913 was when, yes, that's right. My father was born in 1912. Yes. And my mother was born, in 1913. Although she grew up partially in New York, she came back to Oakland. And I remember as small children in Oakland, walking from West Oakland to Lake Merritt under the leadership of Susan's mother, who was the older sibling. There were, at the time, there were 4 siblings. Later on, there became 8, but at that time there were 4 who could walk from West Oakland to Lake Merritt. So we have a very long history at Lake Merritt. because that was the place to go, especially on a weekend. And at that time, even small children could walk through Oakland and feel perfectly safe. Oakland at the time that I grew up was a very diverse city and a wonderful place to be. So, and when I had my daughter, we came to Lake Merritt, to Fairyland, every year, especially on Halloween, because Fairyland was the safest place to be for small children on Halloween. And so after, when I grew up, it was perfectly safe to go through the neighborhood because everyone in the neighborhood knew us, and our parents felt secure allowing us to go trick-or-treating through the neighborhoods. Later on, it became a little more challenging and risky for children to go trick-or-treating, and this is why it was so great to have the Fairyland, to have Fairyland here. And I have, over the years, walked around Lake Merritt. I have not done so as much this year, but up to and including last year, I have walked around Lake Merritt often, and I have often come out just to be here, just to sit and relax, because it's a beautiful place to be.
Thank you. Can we, is there someone else? I think we want, what I want to do, thank you, okay. What I want to do is, I know that Mrs. Price, I'd like her to say something. I know she has something to say. And right afterwards, I know that there are people sitting out there. I'm gonna pick, see if I just proved that I will pick on you. So you might as well volunteer. Okay, I see somebody in the back. Let's go with you. Thank you so much. Then,
hi, I'm Mary McCall, born and raised in Oakland. Yay. Went to Fairyland as a kid, took my kids there, took my grandkids there. My parents, we had 13 kids, so Lake Merritt was our vacation too, because we couldn't afford to go anyplace else. And on Sunday afternoons in the spring and summer when they had the big bands, in the bandstand there, and my parents were community activists, that's where we learned about diversity and community, and you don't sit in your own house. You get out, you get involved.
Hi, my name is Kelly, and I spent my youth here till I was 13, and then I left and came back, and I've been back for 20 years. And when I was younger, I had a lot of experiences. We went to Fairyland a lot, and my mom would walk the lake, and I would ride my bike while she did that, and I just really loved that. And we did paddle boats a lot, and just really loved Oakland. And so it's also been a real joy to raise my kids here. My children really enjoy it now, and particularly when I can bring them here and they come to events or hanging out around the lake, taking them to Fairyland, and whenever people come visit, I always take them to Fairyland when we had small kids. And it's just a really warm feeling to think about this place that has just endured so many generations, and it just really fills a lot of us up with warmth. So it's been a real pleasure to be in and around the lake and spending time there now. When I was younger, I used to do the ballet over here at the Henry J. Kaiser Theater. I don't know if anybody remembers participating in that, but there's just a lot of really great memories in and around Oakland, so it's been great for me.
similar, it's Fairyland, that's the trigger, right? So I was born and raised Oakland, and my granny lived in St. Paul's Tower, which if you don't know is the tan and white building right by Lake Merritt, right across from Fairyland. So we would spend every Saturday with Granny, and she would take us, she had a membership, and she would take us to Fairyland every Saturday. And then my other lake memories are in school, in elementary school, we'd do the field trips, right, to the bird refuge, the field trips here, where you dissected owl pellets, and wandered around the museum. And even now, I tell people that if they want to know Oakland, if they want to see Oakland, they need to go down to the lake, because it's the best representation, right? Like the gentleman was saying, we have everybody there.
I just want to add, I really am glad that you brought up the paddle boating, because I was a grown up. My daughter told me about paddle boating, and so it's always something that brings you back to the lake, it seems like, you know. And that paddle boating was a wonderful experience. And you know, one of my, other than the necklace of lights, one of my best memories is a very little tiny experience that I had walking around the lake, and I stopped and I laid down on my back, and the clouds that were passing over in the blue sky, and it was just, and it was peaceful, and you know, you didn't have to worry about somebody coming along and harassing you or anything like that, you know, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I just want to say that I was in one of those pageants at the Christmas pageant at the Kaiser Auditorium.
Let's talk a little bit more about those pageants, because, yes.
Oh boy, were they something. Miss Jorgensen was the dance teacher, Louise Jorgensen, and she would go to each school and prepare that particular site for a scene in the total pageant, and it worked like clockwork. Now, I was in it in the early years, and so most of the black children were relegated to being brownies. So we had the outfit and everything. This was a subtlety that went through, you know, all of this. And then I remember McClymonds, they did the African program. You remember that? Yeah. Oh boy. Memories for sure. But one of your comments brought to mind, as young children, we could walk the neighborhood because it was a community and a family. And if you did something wrong, shame on you, because the parents would find out. My father was a shoe repairman and had a shop at 32nd and Peralta. My mother had the beauty shop right next door, and it was across from playground. Come on, brain. Anyway, it was a playground across the street. The children in the neighborhood would get together, pack a lunch, because we're gonna go camping. And the camping was a long walk from 32nd and Peralta to Lake Merritt. And we were happy with it. And then we would spread out our lunch and have a picnic. The other comment I wanted to make, I was tied to education in Oakland. I was the executive assistant to Dr. Bowick when he was superintendent there at the school. And I was the community relations person. So I had to move throughout the schools and see the changes and try to come about with some peaceful, you know, reconciliation among the children. Also, I remember while I was sitting here, I was on the board at the museum. Yeah. Well, I don't know. before the changes.
That was old Oakland.
That was old Oakland, but with the old Oakland, at my age and time, I was the token. And so I have a lot of token-like experiences living in Oakland. But my daughters, who grew up in Oakland, had a chance to benefit from the changes we made, the times we spent in the city, and so forth. Last but not least, I'm a genealogist. Uh-oh. My mother came to live with me in the 80s, and she would talk about the family, and then I got curious and started the research, and then got some training in Salt Lake City. That was an interesting experience too, being in Salt Lake City. That's another subject. But I've done and am still doing the genealogy of Oakland residents. And I started from 1870, every 10 years, to see what the population was like and there. Of course, I have the Floods and the Ricks and all of these families who were there before. So that's my passion now, and that's what keeps me going, is the genealogy, yeah.
I'm sorry. He's my cousin, but I'm just my cousin. Hey, cousin. On?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's, I was born and lived in Berkeley the first 8 years of life, and then my folks moved to Haywood. So I've been out in the area. I live in Pleasanton now, but my grandmother Grace lived across the street from the lake in apartments there at the end of her life, and that's what I know about my grandmother. My nana is what we call her, lived there. So 2 people on the panel up there are my cousins. Yeah. I'm great.
I didn't come to Oakland until 1986, but I have to say that I really miss the Festival of the Lake and First Fridays at the museum before the changes.
Do you mind talking a little bit about your experiences at Festival of the Lake? Because it's unfamiliar to people. The lady also in the back with that really snappy fedora, I don't know if she's willing to talk, but if you would, AJ, yeah, I'd like, if you wouldn't mind first with the microphone talking about the festival, and AJ's shaking her head no. Okay.
Well, it was all the neighborhood groups and all the ethnic groups, and there was a lot of different kinds of food and dancing, and it was just much more homey than the Arts and Soul Festival is now. And walk around and you would see people that you knew, and it was more enclosed area, smaller area. And it was very exciting because they have, dancing and music and, like I said, different kinds of food, and then you could find out all information about what was going on in Oakland because all the groups were represented.
Yes, AJ.
Hi. I don't have much to say, but since Gayle was harassing me. I'm actually from Chicago, and you don't really care where you're going anyway. It's really nice. Just come out. So I moved out to San Francisco, roomed with her, and I said, okay, I'm gonna stay 3 years. Well, that was 1982, by the way. I said I'm gonna stay 3 years. San Francisco was okay, but I grew up in the Midwest. It was too congested and so forth. And I met a woman who lived in Oakland. We had met at transit conferences some years before. She invited me over to dinner. Long story short, I came over. I said, this I can breathe. This I like. San Francisco was beautiful, but the architecture across it was much more varied. I drove around. 6 months later, I moved across the bridge to Oakland. I lived a couple of blocks from Lake Merritt. So I got into the habit of walking the lake with other people and so forth and so on. Like most of you, it's nice to have that lake there. You can go and walk around it. And I was on one of the original organizing committees that started the festival. And I don't have many memories of being a participant because I was always working, working to do it. And it was just wonderful, and especially the first few years before it just kept growing and getting bigger. And my memory of it is that we kind of became a victim of our own success because there were just it outgrew the space and everything else, and so forth and so on. But it really was wonderful. Really enjoyed that festival, and when it finally had to end because of problems, I missed it. But what I missed about it was the beginning in the early years. It was just wonderful and peaceful, and that sort of thing. And I still live in Oakland, so almost 40 years later, I didn't leave after 3 years.
Yes. Somebody back.
One thing that I forgot to mention, there used to be a science center, I think there still is a science center, but it was broader in the past. And I taught school in Oakland, so I would bring my classes to the science center at Lake Merritt. And we also spent a week at classes at the here at the museum for a number of years. These museum classes existed here, and we would go and we would have our lunch at the lake because it was so close. And I remember on one occasion I took my class to Judge Judy's court. I don't know if you remember that, but I do.
Hi everyone, my name is Mihir. I'm actually relatively, I think, new to Oakland compared to some of the other people. I came here 3 years ago, and just, I think, somewhat interestingly from an outsider's perspective, what drew me to Oakland was my perception of it as an integrated, diverse, like the future, right? In a way, like a chance to be in a place that was full of hope and people from so many different backgrounds. And I think it's rare to have intergenerational spaces like this, to hear about how things have changed, and I'm hearing a lot of that. Not having been so new to Oakland, it's incredible to me, and it feels like home already. But it seems like it was in the past even something greater, or there's been some changes. And I'm just wondering if people can speak to that. We've already talked about it somewhat, but
No, they talked about it a lot before you came here.
Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there have been a lot of changes, and what are the roots of those changes, and how can is there a way of getting back some of that good stuff, right? Anyway, I don't know if there's thoughts on that.
Speaking of the good stuff, how many of you guys have been to the garden here? Yes, it is amazing. And I've taken my children, they've had workshops, bug workshops. We were into bugs for a while. And we've had bug workshops, and they have what I call
a bee homeless shelter for bees in the garden. So if you haven't been, go by and check it out. And also, just listening to everybody's different experiences, the lake actually reflects the diversity of what Oakland has a reputation of being. And you know, it is so diverse, and there's so many diverse activities that can happen for young people and for old people. And my hope is that the diversity remains and stays, and that we work to be inclusive as opposed to exclusive, or this is my territory. Somebody is not Jewish, you know. And if I think if we work towards that, then we'll see a better place.
We have someone right over here with the orange umbrella.
So I came in late, so I don't know what you talked about, the things of the past, that the question that you were asking. But I was born in Oakland and have lived in Oakland or Berkeley my entire life. And when I was a small child, so I guess what I want to say is, like, this moment right now in Oakland does have some really amazing things, but a lot of things we've got to really hang on to. And I guess thinking of, like, when I was a small child, Oakland was a very separate city. There was a level of segregation in many, many areas, in schools, in where people shopped, in lots of things. There was a lot of segregation. And I think that lots of things, like over the last 20 years, there's been a huge amount of, well, I guess really since the 70s, there's been, you know, all kinds of activism and really amazing, like the history that we have of like radical positioning is really something that we have to, like, I think we have to be like nurturing, aware, and that I get concerned. I have a small art space on 15th Street now, and I get concerned when I see all the businesses turning towards serving a sort of 30-something crowd, and feeling like we really have to hang on to that sense of the deep roots of Oakland.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. What I would like to do is, we have one more comment, but what I'd like to do is invite you to continue our conversation, to please take your time with the exhibit, and to stay, because we are going to have, I don't see where Jahi is, but there is going to be a drum circle, right? At 3 o'clock. And then, no, it's not at 3. Because that's true. Okay, thank you. I stand corrected. It is at 3, and then we're actually showing a film at AAMLO at 3. But please, your daughter has a comment.
We have really deep roots in Oakland. I love Oakland. Wherever I am in the world, Oakland is always my home. I remember my grandfather sending my sister and I to run down to Fenton, the lakeshore, where my grandmother would leave to buy him pie, because he wasn't supposed to eat, running back to bring him the pie. I remember going to festivals at the lake. I remember participating in chili cook-offs at the lake. When I was pregnant with my son, I walked the lake every day. And it was always a sense of community there. No one looked at you funny. It was just, everyone spoke to each other. Hi, even made eye contact. And I wanted to go back to that. Sometimes when I'm at the lake, I speak to people, they don't speak. I make eye contact, they avert their eyes. And it cannot remain like that. It's a time to bring back the community. And just, it needs to be a place where everyone belongs and no one tries to take it over.
That's a great way to end. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for coming out, and we'll be here, and the exhibit will be here, and the drum circle will be here.